Alright, so here we are with Spider-Man 2 that just released on PC today, and today we're going to be having a look at its performance using the 7800X3D CPU, and that is paired with an RTX 4090. I do not have an RTX 5090, and that again is paired with 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 megatransfers per second CL30 with tuned timings, and currently we're at 4K. Let me just show you the settings here. It's getting around 50-ish frames per second, right? So let me just show you the settings. Currently at 4K, it does say LG HDR 4K, but it's a capture card. I am running everything maxed out, right? With this and Spider-Man, we do have a couple of ray tracing presets, very high, ultra, ultimate, whatever, right? So I've got everything set to ultimate here. I've got everything maxed out over here. And basically, according to the system requirements, we should be able to select the very high preset and ultimate and get 4K 60 with an RTX 4090 and a 7800X3D. That does not happen, right? So I've got the latest NVIDIA drivers, the ones that released today, 471.12, I believe, and sorry, 571.12, and I've had quite a few issues so far. Now, when you start the game, you can actually select the preset or the upscaling tech, right? Let me actually show you, because in the menu you can't change it. You've got upscale method here, so we do have IGTI, DLSS, FSR, and XSS, right? But we also have currently I'm just at DLAA, so native resolution. So I'm going to go back to the desktop. I just want to show you what settings I mean. All right, so here's the settings as you start the game up, and if we go to graphics settings here, here's the ray tracing preset. If you select Ray Reconstruction enabled here, right? So Legacy, let's just see if Legacy does the same. So Legacy does the same. You can't change anything else. You can't change the upscale method. It sets it to DLSS Ray Reconstruction. You can't set it to know if it's quality, balanced, or performance. And then you also have the new transformer model that you can select here. Now, this transformer model only applies to the Ray Reconstruction portion of DLSS, which is very weird. But also, it does not look good at all in graphical. When it's dark and there's lots of shadows, there's a lot of grainy noise in the image. So we're just going to start off with DLAA 4K. We'll move up on the presets, and let me get back into the game. Okay, so I'm going to start in this specific scene here because I do think it's a little bit more demanding. There's a lot of NPCs here. There's although it is scripted, I just beat Sandman. There's a lot of stuff happening here: water, fire, sand, whatever. All right, so 40-ish frames per second here with the RT Ultimate. So let's just go ahead and disable ray tracing, and we'll test the presets individually. I'm going to try and make this video a little bit shorter because my videos tend to be a little bit longer. So I just want to see what we do have here for ambient occlusion. I don't know, let's use XEGTAO. All right, so we've got everything set to very high. Now I'm just going to set anisotropic filtering to 16 as well. This does not really have a performance impact on higher end GPUs. All right, so on the very high preset without ray tracing now, we're getting above 60 frames per second at all times here with the 4090, and this is at native resolution, remember. Now the previous Spider-Man game was actually very CPU limited as well, and over here the frame time graph is very, very strange. I'm actually wondering if there's not maybe an issue with the latest driver, because I did see issues with Cyberpunk as well with the latest driver, but reverting back to 566.45 resolves the frame time issues when we use frame generation. All right, so I'm going to start enabling DLSS here. Remember, I removed the Ray Reconstruction setting here, so we can actually enable upscaling here. And I don't know if there's enough time, I'll show the Ray Reconstruction model as well. It definitely, there's something wrong with it. All right, so DLSS set to quality here. Let's go ahead and apply that. Let's just see if we actually do become a little bit more CPU bound. We gained quite a bit just by enabling DLSS quality here, right? So we went from around 70 to around 100, 110, 120 frames per second. The performance fluctuates quite a bit. Now, it wants me to go to that mission or that specific waypoint here. So whenever I basically get way off path, it'll just suddenly do something and try to force me into that area. But you can see our GPU usage does drop a bit into the lower 90s, 93 there, and our frame rate then drops to around 90 frames per second. Perfectly fine for a game like this. I'd say 4K native 60 frames per second is fine, although I do have a 165 hertz panel, and I'll be trying to max that out. But I must say the visuals in this game look very, very good. Definitely much better than Spider-Man Remastered, and the combat so far was it's pretty good. And I really did enjoy the opening. So if we go into display, this DLSS quality, right? So let's do we enable frame generation first? We actually can enable DLSS frame generation. Yeah, it's not like the previous game where it bugs out. So DLSS quality, so the same. So this is what I mean. This is exactly what I saw in Cyberpunk 2077 as well with this new driver. The frame time graph is not what it should be, and it actually translates to micro stuttering issues. So I think the best is maybe wait for an updated driver, or revert the driver to the 566.36 or 45 driver, whichever one you used before, because that solves it. But then you also have issues with some of the settings in the new NVIDIA app won't work, right? You won't be able to select them. So this is kind of a shame, where the frame time graph, and as I said, the motion fluidity, it feels very choppy, right? So the lows, the 1%, 0.1% lows, probably aren't accurately measured because of the choppiness of the frame time graph there, but it does definitely translate to choppiness in the game. All right, so DLSS quality with frame generation seems to have some issues there. So let's just go ahead to disable frame generation, test some normal. Let's just see. I actually want to see if FSR frame generation exhibits the same behavior. Yeah, I think it should not. All right, so it doesn't. I think if you don't want to revert to a previous driver, then use FSR frame generation. Although it seems like the boost we saw with the DLSS frame generation was a little bit more, right? So the average at least. Okay, so FSR frame generation seems to work. The frame time graph seems to be fine there. All right, so let's go ahead and then just disable any frame generation tick here. And let's go to DLSS balanced. Can I select balanced? There we go. So let's see. I want to see where we actually become CPU bound, because the game does become CPU bound. The first game, Spider-Man Remastered, as I mentioned before, even on a 7800 X3D, even at 4K output resolution. Remember, when we do change DLSS settings, we do change the internal resolution. So it does seem like we are still getting some increase in the frame rate here, although I did see 90 frames per second there again. So we might be becoming a little bit more CPU bound here. So let's just go ahead and enable frame generation. Just want to see if it has the same issue on balanced. It should, right? This happens in God of War, Ragnarok, and Cyberpunk. So definitely a driver issue. Okay, so we do get a decent boost to our frame rate, 200 frames per second there. So it seems like it does increase the frame rate a bit more than FSR frame generation. But I wouldn't say it's unplayable, but it's a little bit unpleasant. It's not really visually smooth. So let's just go ahead and do FSR frame generation quickly, still with DLSS set to balanced. Then we'll try performance, and then we'll do the same with RT. As I said, I'm going to try and make it a little bit shorter, although there's so many settings. Right, so still 180 something frames per second, so pretty much almost enough. I mean, we do drop below 160 frames per second at times, but almost enough to see. I can't go further than that. Pretty much enough to max out my 165 hertz panel here. All right, so I think if you do want a higher, if you want to max out your monitor, then just use FSR frame generation instead of DLSS for the time being. All right, so let's go ahead and just enable DLSS performance here. I'm going to disable FSR, so DLSS performance quickly. And I do think we should be running into a CPU bottleneck here. Interesting. looking this way, getting 160 frames per second, 100% GPU usage or 98%, but it should fluctuate quite a bit. So 120 frames per second. Just going to try and swing a bit past that spot where we were seeing 90 frames per second. Can't remember exactly where that was, but it was around here, right? So 96 frames per second, 91% GPU utilization, 87%. So we are definitely CPU bound here. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm not going to do frame generation tests here. Let's go ahead and enable some ray tracing. We'll start off on native again. So we'll just disable upscaling here, and we'll use DLAA. And on the custom preset, remember we were getting around 70-80 frames per second without ray tracing. And where's ray tracing now? All right, so we'll just use the high preset ray tracing. It in the top right hand corner does say compiling ray tracing shaders. Okay. All right. Not sure if it's still compiling, but ray tracing high, we are still, and the game crashes. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. I do think it is a driver issue, because it does say here that it could be an overheating GPU, 48 degrees Celsius. All right, it's definitely not overheating. And here's the driver 572. Is it 16? I thought I installed 576.12. Anyway, this is the latest one. Okay, so we do have some driver issues here, unfortunately. All right, so here we are. Okay. So 4K native with the RT set to high, so we're just using DLAA. You can see we're dropping below 60 frames per second at times. Yeah, it does look extremely good though. I'm not going to lie. I do benchmark on a 4K monitor, yeah, that pass through on the capture card, and definitely looks good, but the frame times don't feel very good at all. And I don't think that we are still compiling shaders here, but it definitely it doesn't feel smooth at all. I don't know what's happening here. Something's not right here with this game. Now you can see my mouse cursor has got the thinking wheel as well. Very strange. Okay, so we've got ray tracing preset high. So let's try the very high preset. Let's see if it crashes again. Oh, it's going to be annoying. Did it actually apply the settings now? Ray tracing preset very high. It did. So let's see. Doesn't seem like we lost a lot of performance here. Funny enough, okay, I was about to say that it does feel better, but okay, we lost quite a bit of performance here. We're dropping into the 40s, unfortunately. So not ideal, but I mean, it's ray tracing and it is quite heavy. I'm not going to test all the individual ray tracing settings here, because the video will be extremely long if I do that. I'm just going to test the presets, okay? But you can definitely fine-tune your graphical settings and performance by manually selecting whichever option of the ray tracing options you want enabled. All right, and then lastly, we did test the ultra preset or the ultimate preset, right? So can these not go higher? What does ultimate do? So I think ultimate only changes the ray tracing object range. Yeah. So it also changes these. Okay. So geometry detail and then object range to 10. And then the DLSS Ray Reconstruction is off. Maybe if we enable it in here, right? We'll see if I can enable it. Previously I could not. It was grayed out, but it seems to work now. So it's still 40-ish frames per second here, and not really ideal, I'd say, but it does look the visuals look very, very good. Like the reflection. I'm not even talking just about the ray tracing stuff. The Spider-Man visuals overall look it's pretty good. All right, so let's go back in and sorry, I actually did not do this in the correct order. We should have actually tested DLSS here. So first on the high preset, where we were getting around 60 frames per second, 50 to 60 frames per second. And then we'll just test with DLSS enabled, right? So DLSS, not ultra performance. Which way? This way. So DLSS quality, RT high 4K. Okay, so let's go ahead. we should be able to, there we go, so 100 and something frames per second. Game still looks plenty good. Alright, I'll go this way. I think, okay, no, that's sand blowing. I thought I was seeing some anomalies. I think what I will do is I will enable the Ray Reconstruction upscaler, whatever. Like, that's very weird that it is separate. But I'll enable it, and then you can maybe we can see in the shadow areas if that issue happens again, the graininess. Alright, so always above 60 frames per second. The lows are pretty decent as well. GPU power is quite low, and VRAM usage is just over 12 gig. So definitely need a 16 gigabyte GPU for these settings. And then if we go ahead and do the, where are we now? So ray tracing preset. Let's try the very high with DLSS quality. Let's see if we can maintain 60 frames per second. I think we should remember ray tracing, especially in Spider-Man 1, was very CPU heavy as well. It put a lot of load on the CPU too, and it would actually cause you to become CPU bound in certain areas where you were not previously, even though it's people think it's purely a GPU feature, but it definitely hits the CPU harder as well in certain titles. So managed to maintain around 60 frames per second here, right, which is pretty decent, I'd say. And then what happens if we enable the ultra very high ultimate preset? Yeah, so ultimate, and let's just go ahead. Maybe see, previously in some areas it wasn't as heavy. Maybe it'll be heavier later in the game, I don't know. As I said, I just started the game and thought I'd test in this specific spot because I think it is quite demanding just with everything that's happening on the screen. I know it's boring just swinging around in the specific spot here, but we still, oh, there we go. I was about to say we still haven't dropped below 60 frames per second. So we will need to use more aggressive upscaling here or frame generation to maintain 60 frames per second. So I'm going to just use the, let's use decent, I'd say moderate ray tracing setting. So let's use very high, because this setting is actually very demanding, the ray tracing object range. Right, so let's use the very high preset, and let's do frame generation. So let's do DLSS. Let's see if DLSS frame generation works when we use ray tracing. It does not, or I did not expect it to, but I just wanted to see. So 120 frames per second here is doable. And remember, this is with a 4K output, and we are DLSS quality, right? I believe. And well, I'll put up all the settings are actually up on the screen right now, but for obvious reasons I can't see it because I put them there in edit. So 108 frames per second, 110 frames per second, not bad. So let's just see if we can get rid of the inconsistent frame time graph here just by using FSR frame generation. Sorry, wrong tab here. So just FSR DLSS quality. I was right. Okay, so DLSS quality with FSR frame generation. FSR frame generation is actually pretty good. I use it in most of the Nexus ports, right? All the games that have FSR 3.1 frame generation, and allows you to use DLSS upscaling. I just use DLSS quality and FSR frame generation. It actually boosts the frame rate pretty. It actually boosts the frame rate a little bit higher than what DLSS frame generation does in most games, or in the games that I've tested anyway. But over here, we're still seeing around 120-ish frames per second, so still pretty decent. All right, the video is getting long. Let's move to 1440p. All right, so 1440p, no upscaling, no frame generation, and also no ray tracing. So I just want to see what the native performance is like. And okay, this is quite a big jump, right? But we are CPU bound to getting 91 frames per second. It seems like this specific amount over here is is causing us to become CPU bound. 91% GPU usage, and for some reason I can't stay in the air. And we are definitely getting a lot more CPU bound here at 1440p, even with the 7800 X3D. 9800 X3D is a few percent faster, so I doubt that we we won't become CPU bound even with the 9800 X3D. Frame rates are just a little bit too high, right? So 100 and something frames per second here, not terrible, although the frame time graph definitely there's some issues here. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm going to do the DLSS settings first, and then we'll do frame generation, and then we'll do some ray tracing, but not a lot here at 1440p because we are CPU bound. So let's go ahead and say DLSS quality. Did we gain anything? Not really, right? We gained headroom when it comes to GPU usages, but we're now in the mid 70s, low 80s at times, still pretty much the same frame rate as previously. So definitely CPU bound, which makes it a little bit easier. We don't have to test any more scaling. Right, so DLSS, let's enable frame generation. Yeah, let's just do DLSS. I mean, we test it even though it seems broken. 270 frames per second. This is what you want, right? 1440p DLSS quality frame generation enabled 250 something frames per second. Except this is not what you want when it comes to motion fluidity. DLSS frame generation is supposed to increase your motion fluidity. In this case, it's definitely not. All right, so let's go ahead and just test FSR frame generation. So everything looks to be similar or the same. And if we go, yeah, we should be getting 200 something frames per second, right? So remember, frame generation helps a lot when you are CPU bound. It helps more when you are CPU bound than when you are fully GPU bound. And 220-ish frames per second here. So this is pretty much where I'd be playing the game, right? On my 1440p 165 hertz panel, even though I do have a 4090, I'll be using these settings, cap it to 158 frames per second by using VSync and Reflex, and I'll have a nice cool system running at around 250 watts on the GPU and locking basically my 158 or my 165 hertz panel. Right, so I think that's it for 1440p without ray tracing testing. Let's go ahead and see if we can actually do ray tracing at native resolution. Yeah, we should be able to. So let's just disable all of that, and then we can enable, let's start off with the ultimate preset. Let's see if we can run native 60 frames per second at least. Right, this is did the settings apply? Let me just make the game crashed again. This is kind of annoying. All right, so we're back. I lost my train of thought a little bit, but I do think previously the settings did not apply correctly, and that's maybe why the game crashed. But we were seeing 110 frames per second before the game crashed, and now it is at 60-ish frames per second. Right, so native 1440p, obviously no frame generation, no DLSS, but I do think that even on the very high, the ultimate RT preset, I'm not going to be testing others just to save a little bit of time. Sorry about that. But if we go ahead and just enable DLSS quality here, we should gain back a little bit of our frame rate here. Where are we? So a DLSS quality, still no frame generation. Let's hope the game doesn't crash again. It's really annoying. I'm not going to cut the crashes out either, because this is the authentic experience that you can expect currently. I'm going to try the older driver just to see, but DLSS quality didn't gain us that much, as you can see. So fine, we were probably mid 70s there, now we're mid 80s. So DLSS quality, you can see that we are CPU bound, yet we did not gain that much even with the full ultimate RT enabled. Yeah, all right, so let's go ahead and do frame generation. I'm going to do DLSS frame generation just so you can, or we can see if it helps you at 4K or not at 1440p. I keep on saying 4K. So it does help, but once again, the frame time graph is extremely erratic. And then if we go and just do FSR frame generation, yeah, let's go ahead and apply that. And this is pretty much then how I would be playing, I think. Maybe maybe drop down the very high RT or the ultimate RT just to high or very high. Don't think it is worth it in the specific spot anyway. I mean, obviously there might be some other areas where the differences will be noticed more, but I just want to see the reflections here. Can we see ourselves? We can a little bit. Okay, so just swinging around, being boring and stuff, but I think that's going to be the end of this video. Before we do that, I just want to see if we can replicate the issue with the Ray Reconstruction model. Okay, so I think if we look at these shadows from this distance here, we should be able to replicate it, I think. All right, so let's go to here, and if we go to graphics settings, can we select, where's it now? Ray Reconstruction, Legacy, or Transformer. Does that now then disable DLSS here? Upscale quality, it does disable DLSS. Well, it uses DLSS, obviously, but we can't use native anymore. You can't select DLSS super resolution. I think that's very weird that it is basically split like that. And then if we have a look at our frame rate here, I'm going to disable frame generation, sorry. Then let's just see, maybe it helps a little bit with performance, although I doubt it. So frame generation disabled. So let's just see. Okay, so 100 and something frames per second, 87, 89. Okay, so it did not improve our frame rate either, and I don't think so. I'm not able to see the. Okay, so just look at her face when I move the camera. Okay. So this happens when you use the Ray Reconstruction model. So just don't use it. Like I'm going to disable the Ray Reconstruction model quickly, and then where is that now? Sorry, I'm a little bit lost. So let's just go with off and just use DLSS quality. Okay, let's see if it happens. Moving. Okay, so it doesn't happen. So the Ray Reconstruction model is broken, I think. All right, and on that note, I think we're basically done with the video. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.